country of two agricultures, the disparities, the challenges, the solutions. That is the title and focus of a new book by Wandile Sihlobo. The book, which looks into the divides in the agriculture industry in South Africa, will be officially launched later this month, but is already available. Not only does it dive into the disparities in the sector, but it also unpacks solutions to lessen that divide. To tell us more, I'm now joined by the author himself, Wandile Sihlobo. Wandile, thank you so much for coming all the way through to Joburg to talk to me about this book. And I want to start off by finding out, what is it about agriculture that you are passionate about, that makes you so invested in looking at things that other people shy away from and trying to find those solutions that we need?
I think firstly, thanks for having me on for this. I mean, the agricultural sector, I think one can look at it in a couple of ways. The first part is the fact that in South Africa today, we are struggling with about three broad problems. It's high unemployment, it's rising poverty, and of course it's the issue of low growth. Then the question that we all sit around, particularly as economists and look around, is to say, where are the sources of growth? And agriculture is one of those sectors that I think still has so much to offer in resolving those three problems that we struggle with. But also in the other softer part, I mean, this is also the sector that I think in closing the divide still has a larger room to play, which is why I've consistently done a bit more work onto the agricultural sector.
Why did you rewrite this book 7 times?
I mean, I think the aspect that we always struggle with is that when you think about South Africa's agriculture, there's so much literature that is out there. But when you're looking at the sector, comparing with the other sectors of the economy, in a way, I would say it still sits in the periphery of the conversation, although we're interacting with agriculture, all of us, several times a day. And I thought that if I were to make any addition into the conversation, I would have to try to make it as interesting, hopefully, and as accessible to many people as possible. It talks about two agricultures in South Africa. But this is not a book for farmers or those that want to come into agriculture. This is really a book for all South Africans. So rewriting it, and more importantly, in a narrative form, so that everybody can engage with that information, was very important for me to reaching a broader audience of the people.
So just give us some context on that title, Two Agricultures. That comes from our history.
That comes from a history. I mean, the title in itself is really, a tribute to the work that was done by an economist, Marley Lipton, and then she goes to UCT in 1976, and she presents this paper where she was talking about South Africa being a country of two agricultures in a very different context at the time. But if you look at the sector today, it's still that agriculture that is really about two sectors. You have one that is largely sophisticated and doing reasonably well, commercial agriculture dominated by white farmers, and then you have another sector that is smallholder dominated by black farmers. The question then is to say, how do we continue to improve the smallholder farmer while at the same time we're not jeopardizing the progress that we are seeing on the commercial sector? So I think that the title on itself, painting those disparities, is an important one, but I think the key gist of the book is to say closing that divide, and further than that, growing the agricultural sector.
So land and food, they're very emotional issues in South Africa for many reasons, because partly, of our past. Because that divide is still very real, the divide you describe so eloquently in your book. It's a very difficult subject to write about because it's so emotive, controversial, and highly politicized. Have you ever been criticized for not being militant or political enough when you talk about land reform?
I think there were, of course, feelings like that. I mean, this is the second book that I'm writing at this time. We had the first book, which was called Finding Common Ground, Land, Equity and Agriculture. And that book came out 2020, and there was a feeling that, it didn't really drive the political agenda of some people in a certain way that they would want it. But I think that I took a cautious step, because we have to realize that we are all sitting here, we want to make South Africa work, and we understand that the context at which we are in is way more different than in the past. But that doesn't mean that land reform shouldn't be done, but we should be thinking about what's the better way of doing land reform, understanding that agriculture still needs investments, but at the same time land reform is something that needs to be done. That book carried a number of ideas about how to to drive land reform. This particular book adds to that context where it moves forward from land alone and thinking about how do you make agriculture more productive, agro-processing, and driving the rural economy forward. So it is a step forward from that.
See, you talk about the divide and some of the solutions. There are so many role players who are involved in bridging that divide already. People who are trying to move towards those people who are stuck in situations where they don't have access to title deeds, access to finance, access to mechanization, access to big business who are going to pull them up, as it were. And so many people are already invested in that process. And I think that's evidenced by the number of very highly placed and well-respected people in and out of the sector who've already read your book, who've recommended it, and who speak incredibly highly about that. To reach out to people, I mean, in your dedication, you say to those who care about bettering South Africa, and that should be every single person. If they're watching and they're not quite convinced, what's that one thing in your book that would enable them to understand the situation better, to help them improve South Africa?
I mean, I think the first thing is that, as you rightly say on a dedication, the book is not necessarily only about agriculture, but it's for everyone that cares about bettering this country. Agriculture offers the avenue of saying how do we make economic progress, but at the same time, how do we ensure that that progress is not just for white farmers or certain few individuals, it's for everybody to do that. And I think we have gotten into a situation in South Africa where when we talk about transformation, we see it as a zero-sum game. You're taking from a white farmer, giving it to a black farmer. But I do think that we can think about growing the South African agricultural pie. And there's a number of things that have hindered transformation over the past. Some lie on the government side, but also some lie on the private sector side. We all carry some level of blame here. And the idea then in the book was to say, let's discuss the political economy issues of agriculture. Let's discuss the technical aspects that needs to be done, either infrastructure, municipalities that are not working, rural crime, institutions that are failing, and actually see how do we resolve that. To your point about many successful projects that are being done on the ground, how do we learn from where there's progress and seek commonalities, outline those, and then talk about how do we take those forward? And importantly, the disparities that we see in South Africa's agriculture, it's not just a country of two agricultures on a racial terms, but also even on a geographical terms. You think about the provinces that were part of the former homelands, the Eastern Cape, Transkei area, parts of KZN, Limpopo, and Northwest, they still have those disparities. And those are also the provinces with higher levels of poverty as well as unemployment. The question is to then, how do you use agriculture and agro-processing to grow those areas? And in the book, we dive deeper into the technicalities about how to do that in a narrative way of storytelling, which I think it will resonate with many readers.
So many people have a deep love for agriculture. I know many of our viewers have a deep love for agriculture. I wish we could continue the discussion longer. Unfortunately, that is where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much for coming in. A country of two agricultures. It's sold out in so many places, which is a testament to its popularity, and hopefully there will be a reprint soon so more people can get hold of it. Thank you so much, Wandile, for coming in. That was Wandile Sihlobo speaking on his new book.